So you have a famous tagline.
Make it work.
Where did that come from?
Teaching my classrooms. I even remember when I first said it because I was mad as hell at the students.
Welcome to Living Not So Fabulously. Today we are talking with the Tim Gunn, fashion icon, TV legend, and mentor who turned make it work into a designer's mantra. From his days as associate dean at Parsons, a mentor on Project Runway, and author of many books including The Natty Professor, Tim's eye for style and knack for helping others shine is unmatched.
And get this, Tim shares how he wasn't paid for the first 2 years of Project Runway, and then shares what he did to make that work. So let's hear Tim in his own fabulous words share his wisdom. For those of our listeners and viewers who don't know, you weren't always a rock star celebrity.
I'm still not.
And shame on them for not knowing.
Exactly. You had a whole life prior to Project Runway. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Well, I was a career educator, 29 years in the classroom. And that's actually where the Project Runway producers found me. They were looking for a consultant for this new show about fashion. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people in the industry had said, well, you should talk to Tim. And the reason for that was because I made huge sweeping changes in the fashion department at Parsons because it had been moribund for, 50 years. Mm-hmm. I arrived in the department in 2001. I'd been at Parsons since 1983. I arrived in 2001, or 2000 rather, and the curriculum had not changed since 1951.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez,
it was
50 years.
Including no fashion history, no technology, computers were forbidden. I thought, this is so 19th century. Where are we?
What was your financial state of mind at that time? What was your financial condition?
Desperation. I was a pauper educator living in New York, an expensive city, right, living paycheck to paycheck to paycheck. And I really did think, if I lose my job, what am I going to do? Move in with my sister? And I thought about that quite frequently. Yeah. But it was good training for me financially because I was then, and I still am, a spendthrift. I'm very cautious about how I spend my money.
You're surrounded by all this high-end fashion, and you can control your spending?
John, I have to tell you, I find spending a lot of money on an item of apparel or an accessory to be really nauseating. It bugs the living daylights out of me.
Really?
There's that $2,500 handbag that you want. How about spending $1,000 and giving the balance to a charity? You know, $1,000 is still a really great bag.
Yes.
And then when it comes to Birkins, spending $25,000, $30,000 on a handbag, are you out of your mind? So, I mean, I believe in clothes that will hold up, that have quality, but I don't believe in spending a lot of money. It makes me feel really sick, including you may laugh, you may not. My vacation budget, and it's not that I take a budget vacation. It's that I only vacation once every 15 years.
I've read that somewhere. How do you even do that?
Once every 15 years, I got wanderlust.
Are you you staycation all the time?
I staycation.
Well, you live in New York City.
Yeah.
I mean, not it's the worst place in the world.
Exactly.
Right?
And if I really feel a need to travel, I go to the Met. Metropolitan Museum, that is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Exactly. So I'm curious, having been what did you say, a pauper's educator, what is your thought on teacher salaries and what they're being paid and how that affects the quality of their work?
Well, I think it's abhorrent. I mean, being a teacher is a bit like being a member of the clergy. It's a calling, and you're going to do it no matter what. It's not as though, I can't do anything else, I'll teach. Mm-hmm. And the portions are small and the food is bad. I mean, the rewarding part is the students, and that's what always kept me in. So when I'm in a classroom, I'm 1,000% there. Mm-hmm. It's at other times when my mind will wander. And I didn't dwell on having to move in with my sister because, quite frankly, I wouldn't have. But
Is she going to watch or hear this?
But I thought, I'll be living in a cardboard box in the park.
Yeah.
So it just, you feel very vulnerable.
Right.
Yeah. one of the reasons why John and I were, in a sense, enamored with your story is because we did hear you on Farnoosh Torabi's podcast, So Money. And on that podcast episode, you told the story about starting your career in TV. And I'm just kind of curious, you mentioned a little bit there about pay. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what happened during that story?
Oh, I'm happy to share. It was January 2004, and I received a call from the Project Runway producers, and I knew nothing about this show. And they told me what they were going to do, and my response was, fashion reality? This industry has enough trouble without that. They said, well, we just need 10 minutes of your time. Let us come in. So we met, and I learned that they were the Project Greenlight producers. So I thought, well, they have a seriousness of purpose and integrity, and this could be really interesting. And they were looking for a consultant. They weren't looking for the role I ended up having on the show. At that time, at least in our discussion, that role didn't exist.
You were going to be behind the scenes,
yes,
so to speak. Okay.
It was 24 to 48 hours before the designers were arriving when the producers came to me and asked, would you be willing to go in and into the workroom and ask them what they're doing?
Oh, really?
And I said, well, that's how I have spent my life.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can do that. But I was very aware of camera placement, and I thought as long as they have the designer responding to me, no one needs to see me, no one needs to hear my voice. Mm-hmm. And we did the season, and I thought, I'll never end up in the cut of the show, and it didn't bother me. I honestly have no ego about these things.
Sure.
But I also learned very quickly how different the role of a mentor is from the role of a teacher.
Mm. So it sounds like your role kind of crept, and you're taking on more and more responsibility. You're actually adding value to the show. You're helping more than just being a part-time consultant, right? When did the money conversation actually come up?
Quite frankly, and I mean this with all sincerity, it didn't bother me not to be paid. I have a full-time job. I thought, well, if they pay me, then I'm kind of double dipping because I have a 12-month job at Parsons, and I'm taking a month and doing the show. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, I didn't even want to get paid. But then we went into season 2, again, unpaid. And we did all of season 2, and the money conversation never came up again. And I should add, the producers weren't the ones who would be paying me. It would have been Miramax.
Right.
Miramax owned the show. So I was at a GLAAD fundraising gala in Los Angeles at a Bravo table between or after season 2. Season 3 hadn't been picked up yet. And at the table was this charming gentleman I didn't know, and he asked me, who represents you? And I responded, who represents me for what? He said, your contracts, your deals. Contracts? Deals? I said, well, I have a book contract at the moment, but it's not as though I'm getting paid anything. Right. And he was incredulous. What? You're not getting paid anything. So the Bravo executives are shouting at him, get away from Tim. Get away from him. You don't need to talk to him. Stop that.
Oh, wow.
So Jonathan said, his name is Jonathan Swayden. He's still my agent 18 years later.
Loyalty.
I love that man. He said, when I come to New York next, we need to talk. So in preparation for that, he asked me to get together all the paperwork that I had about everything that I was doing. And I assembled it, including the book contract. And he said to me afterwards, these are the worst contracts I have ever seen in my entire professional career.
Wow.
You just sign these things? And I said, well, what am I supposed to do? I don't know. I mean, I assume that they're boilerplate, this is what people sign. He said, not anymore. So he connected me with a fantastic lawyer, my love, and business people. And at any rate, thanks to Jonathan, I started getting paid. It wasn't a lot by any means, but it grew.
Right.
Yeah. I think that you bring up a very good point. a lot of times shows get started, they get started on a shoestring budget, and more often than not, they think, okay, we'll be lucky if we move on to a second season. But then your show blew up.
And who knew?
Right. Nobody knew
yeah.
that was really happening. Do you mind if I ask, do you think that that your background as a teacher and maybe the mindset that you had as a teacher and that pauper
Educator
mindset played a little bit into this idea of, oh, well, I'm not getting paid and that's okay?
Oh, I'm certain that it played into it. I'm certain that it did.
Yeah.
And I have no complaints. I have no regrets, none. And I know a lot of people professionally who won't even have a conversation until they know what the compensation is.
Yeah.
And that's just not within my DNA. I want to know what it is first, because if I'm not interested, then who cares?
Yeah. Right.
There was a time in the whole fervor of Project Runway when I was being asked to represent certain products. And the company would say, we'll send it to you in advance and see what you think about it.
Right.
And I always responded the same way. Thank you. I will go out and buy it.
Mm-hmm.
Because then I feel I'm unencumbered. I don't have an obligation. I'm not being influenced by this free thing.
Sure.
I think it speaks to the way in which our culture and society has really changed and tried to make individuals the spokesperson of products that they aren't or don't want to be. Yeah.
It's very true. And so I will only stand up for something if I really and truly believe in it.
Yeah, and it sounds like you have that constitution, but on top of that, it also sounds like you like to use your success and the financial security that's come with that to help others.
Oh, I do.
Yes.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
And
Yeah.
how are you using that opportunity to give back?
Well, last semester, the spring semester, I taught at Emerson College in Boston for nothing. And
Nice.
paid for my travel and expenses. And it was expensive, which is why I'm not back this semester. I just thought, I can't keep doing this.
Yeah.
And I give to a lot of charitable causes. And in the case of Emerson, it was a course in entrepreneurship, and students had wonderful ideas. And I co-taught with a fabulous person by the name of Sharon Topper. And we arranged for some of these presentations to be made to the Board of Governors, the Board of Trustees of Emerson. And Sharon and I both sort of, in hindsight, foolishly thought, oh, the board members will help invest in this. Mm. They didn't. Not a single solitary dime. And we're talking about $2,000 or $2,500 to start up these wonderful projects.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing it.
Oh, wow.
And I said, I'm partially it's because I believe in you students and what you're doing,
Right.
and partially it's to shame the board.
Yeah.
You know,
Nice.
why else are you here?
Yeah, using that financial security to be able to put some people in check, right?
Yeah. I mean, there were 40 board members in this room. If they had each given $50, that student would have had $2,000.
Right.
So that was the first thread in our interview with Tim.
You know, it always strikes me how some of us know our worth and stand up for ourselves from the very beginning,
Right.
and other of us can struggle for years to try to get paid what we're worth. You know, it reminds me of that time when we had one of the largest consulting firms in the world reach out to us and ask us to do a 1-hour investing workshop for their employees. And not only did they not want to pay us for our time and expertise to give the 1-hour investing workshop, but they wanted us to use our own money to fly from Philadelphia to Denver and pay for our own hotel.
Yeah.
And as Tim shared, there is a time and a place to do work for free.
It's not for billion-dollar companies.
No, but at some point we need to know what our worth is and stand up for ourselves. And that is a hard balance.
Yeah, so let's stick a pin in it and we'll be right back.
Welcome back for the most stylish advice you've ever heard from the incomparable Tim Gunn.
In the second half of our interview with Tim, he is once again being a fabulous mentor, and this time it's money advice, whether you're just getting started in your career or you're wanting to make progress. So let's dive back into that interview with Tim.
So you have a famous tagline.
Make it work.
Where did that come from?
Teaching my
Yeah.
classrooms. I even remember when I first said it because I was mad as hell at the students. It was a year-long course, so 30 weeks. Seniors, they're developing their final thesis. And one of my students comes to me and says, I don't want to do this anymore. And I thought she meant she wanted to leave school. And I said, what's going on? Tell me. And she said, this project doesn't move me any longer. I said, are you talking about when you say you don't want to do this anymore, you want to do a different project? She said, yes. I said, it's April. We have 6 weeks left. You've been working on this for months. What's going on? And she said, oh, I'm just tired of it. I wanted to slap her, frankly, and just say, snap out of this malaise. I said, well, I'm telling you right here and now, you're not going to do that. You're going to continue on this path. And now, for the duration of this class, it was a 6-hour class twice a week, you're going to study this work, offer up a diagnosis of what the issues are, and then you're going to devise, and I'll help you, a prescription for how to make it work. But until you can identify what the issues are, you can't offer up a prescription. And I said, the reason I'm making you do this is because you will now have wonderful, important resources moving forward when it comes to problem solving. If you just abandoned it, then hopefully project number 2 is great, but what if it isn't great? So by working through all this, you'll be a stronger, better prepared person for the world.
So you're basically fashion Yoda, right, at this point, right? And knowing how to make it work. We're curious, what kind of mistakes are you seeing young and up-and-coming fashion designers in the start of their career?
I really think you need to hitch your wagon to something big. Something that can give you resources, which is why I loved making the cut on Amazon so much, because we had Amazon's deep pockets helping these young designers.
Like that runway fashion show in front of the Eiffel Tower.
Oh my God, fabulous. It was incredible. So many young designers, and I'm including my own students, think, oh, I'll have a little shop and I'll make everything myself and I'll have this clientele. You're going to go under in less than a year. It's just not going to happen for you unless you can bring out a lot of product in various sizes and step away from forgive me for this expression, but I call it happy hands at home.
What does that mean?
It means you're sitting at home, you're sewing things, you're crocheting, and here's what I just made. Do you like this pot holder? Well, it's $3. Well, let's calculate your time, your materials. It can't be happy hands at home. It has to be something big. And frankly, I'm not a Nostradamus, I shouldn't say this, but when I took over the fashion department at Parsons in 2000. It was a whole new era of American fashion because prior to 1990, early 90s, young fashion designers, my students, would never go off on their own. They would be working for a big designer as an assistant designer.
Yeah.
And that's the way that the American fashion industry worked. In the 90s, it was thrown into this topsy-turvy cyclone. And when it came out of it, it was a welcoming environment for young, entrepreneurial thinking designers. And I think that's part of the reason that Project Runway took off the way that it did, because it was, first of all, magnifying that and supporting it and saying, this can be you. But the world's really changed since then. That was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think we're back to a time when young designers should be working for larger companies. And then later, they can go out on their own. Donna Karan worked for Anne Klein, and Tomi Otaki, the financial backer of Anne Klein, said to her, you have a real vision. I'm going to back you in your own company. And that's how she started Donna Karan.
Do you feel like some of the younger folks are trying to make it big too quickly and not trying to learn the ropes before they get into the industry?
There's certainly that element. But I also want to point the finger, and forgive me, everybody out there, I'm going to point the finger at fashion educators. I think they're entirely too indulgent of their students and what they may or may not want to do. I really believe in tough love. I'm not going to let you make a T-shirt. I mean, there are millions of T-shirts out there. Stop it.
So what would you say to some of the younger designers who are struggling financially to make it work? Any suggestions or motivation you can give to them?
Well, live and work within your means. It's very important. Set a budget, follow it. If you're uneasy about any of those things, meet with someone who does this for a living. I always said to my students, and we had business classes at Parsons, but I always said to my students, you're not a business person. You need one.
Yes.
You cannot do all of this. So know what you don't know and seek help. And there are a lot of people in the industry, and I know this from my own students, who are willing to give their time to help a young person. And if, in fact, it's determined that the relationship should continue, then you can start talking about a payment plan or something or other, some compensation. But know what you don't know and seek help, because there may be someone who says, this whole thing is completely out of whack and just unsustainable, and you need to recalibrate all of your thinking.
Right.
Or you just need to tweak this and that.
Yeah.
And also within fashion or any creative industry, unless you have something new to say, why bother? There's just as Heidi would say, there's too much noise out there.
Yeah.
How do you cut through it? Unless you have something that's really special, you're not going to, and you'll just be part of the noise.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It's almost like you're saying that every single one of us, or especially these individuals, needs somebody else to say, make it work.
Yeah,
Right?
I do. I always say life is a big collaboration. We are not solos. We need other people.
Yeah.
With that in mind, with all the wisdom that you've gained over the years, what would you say to the regular person, those inside and outside the fashion industry, if they're struggling financially and they're struggling to kind of cross that make it work moment?
Well, since I was one of those people for quite a long time, you really have to discipline yourself. You just have to practice a lot of self-discipline about what you're spending, how you're spending it. Today, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that there's just so much stuff out there and there's so much waste. And I think a lot of people spend money impulsively. And part of it is a high, wanting to achieve a high. Oh, I'll feel great if I buy that.
Right.
But then think of the consequences when the credit card bill comes. And as someone who lived with credit card debt for decades, what a relief it is to not have any.
Yeah.
And to have paid off a mortgage. And it's a huge relief. And would I want to go back to those days where I'm full of debt? Never in a million years. Never. Ergo, the once every 15 years vacation.
You have so much wisdom to share, and thank you so much for sharing it with us, with the general population. It's a treasure.
Well, you're enormously kind and generous to say that, and anything that I can offer to anyone, I'm happy to.
And that's a wrap on our interview with the natty, bespoke professor himself, Tim Gunn.
I think the big takeaway from Tim's interview, him having spent his entire career helping people, is to know when to ask for help. I think so many of us as entrepreneurs, especially as we're starting out as business owners, is we try to wear all the hats. It's hard to be the creative writer, the innovative app developer, or the owner of the new popular coffee shop in town, and be the bookkeeper, the accountant, the attorney. And juggling all those things at the same time, you can't be great at all that.
Right, so ask for that help. And as Tim said, sometimes there are professionals out there who are willing to help you pro bono. But remember, eventually, you're gonna have to pay.
Thanks for tuning in. Keep making it work by catching new episodes of Living Not So Fabulously every Wednesday at noon Eastern Time at yahoofinance.com, your favorite podcast player, and YouTube.
Like, subscribe where possible, set notifications, and until next time,
Stay fabulous.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.